Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Erica. Today I'm going to show you how to make these adorable quilted tote bags. Now this little tote bag might look familiar to you. This is actually a mini version of my weekend tote bag. I released that a couple years ago. Right after I did that, I did a zipper weekend tote bag, which was a lot of fun, and someone had asked me to do a mini. So I did do a mini of the zipper tote bag, but I never did a mini of the regular one. And I've always wanted to do one, so I thought today would be a great day for that. So I'm going to be showing you how to do this cute mini quilted tote bag. I'll insert a picture here of what the original weekender quilted tote bag looked like so you can see. Today we're going to be making its mini counterpart. The only difference is in this one I'm adding front pockets, back pockets, and then we have an inside pocket we'll be adding as well. All right, let's go ahead and get started with today's tutorial. Here's what you're going to need to make the mini weekend tote bag. So there's quite a few supplies for this project. I'm going to leave everything in the pattern. All the cutting sizes and everything that you'll need will be in the PDF pattern. But just really quickly, you're going to need some lining, some fabric for the bottom and top sides. You're going to need some fabric for your pockets, and then I've also pre-cut my binding for this project. So for the little pockets and the sides, I've actually just cut my binding strips going with the grains, so no stretch there. But for the side panels, when we're stitching up those side panels, we want some stretchy binding, and so this binding was made on the bias. This one is nice and stretchy, and I have a whole video on how to make bias binding here on YouTube, so I'm not going to do that in today's video, but if you're interested in learning how, go ahead and check that video out. I will make sure to link that below this video. The other things you're going to need are, of course, a rotary trimmer. It's also handy to have some sort of an acrylic ruler. I've already cut all my pieces out, but I do like to use this to mark my lines when I'm getting ready to quilt my project. You're also going to need 4 pieces of decorative ribbon. 2 of them are going to go on the bag as an accent, and then 2 are going to be used at the top to tie your bag together. You're also going to need some straps. I'm just using white cotton webbing. If you're taller, you might want to make your straps a little bit longer. And then you're also going to need some fusible foam. And I'm using this Bossell in our form plus. This is double-sided fusible, and this came in a piece that is 24 by 58, and it's enough for me to get 2 bags out of this, plus I also have some leftover. And then the last thing that I think is helpful for this project is obviously a little pair of scissors and wonder clips. We're going to be sewing together some pretty thick layers, and the wonder clips are a lot better for keeping everything together than regular pins are. And if your machine is having a hard time getting through all of this, I also recommend using a denim needle on your machine. That can really help get through all of those thick layers. The other thing that you are going to need, and you can use foam for your pockets as well, but for the side and inside pockets, I actually prefer using this fusible fleece. It's a lot thinner, so it's not quite as bulky. So I just have a little section of this, just enough for our 3 pockets. We have 1 on each outside and then 1 on the inside. You'll also, of course, need an iron and a sewing machine. I'm going to be using my Laura Star Titan. This is one of the best irons, and it's so good with this fusible. When you go to fuse it on, you use the steam and it fuses in an instant. And then lastly, and this is a new product to me, so I just wanted to mention it in today's video, it can be helpful to have some starch when you're working with bags because it helps give your fabric a little bit more structure. And one thing that I just recently tried, it's called Acorn Easy Press Fabric Treatment, and I'll put a link on where I got mine below. I just got mine off Amazon. This also is not a sponsored admission. I just wanted to try it because I've seen a lot of people talking about it recently. Normally I use Mary Ellen's Best Press, but I did want to give this a try, and I will say that this is no comparison. So if you like your fabric really stiff and starched, this is such a game changer. So I do have a video here on how to starch fabric, and I will link that below. And I would normally take a piece of fabric and completely submerge it in my Stay Flow starch mixture and then let it dry overnight, and then I'd come back and press it. Well, this is basically that, only it's in a bottle, and I'll show you a little demo of it. But this is a continuous mist spray, so it sprays really well, and it gets your fabric really wet. So you just spray it, and then you just sit there and press it until it's dry. And this felt like it turned my fabric almost into paper. It was the weirdest thing. So it basically is like spray starch, but apparently it is not starch. It's eco-friendly. It doesn't have any of the harmful chemicals. It doesn't like flake, get those little white flakies that sometimes starch can get. And so this, I have to say, this is quite an amazing product. That said, it's also a little expensive. So if you're gonna be spraying a lot of things and you don't need them to be super stiff, I'd probably stick with the Mary Ellen's Best Press because it's a little bit cheaper. I also have a blog post all about starch with a recipe to make your own if you really want to get more economical. This stuff was a little bit pricey. I'll put on the screen right here how much it costs, but I remember thinking, wow, that's kind of a lot, especially if you're gonna be using a lot of it to starch your things. I don't think I'd use this to starch an entire quilt. I'd probably use the Stay Flow just to be cost effective. But if you're making a small project like this, then this actually works really well. You don't have that many pieces to spray. And I just did want to mention it in today's video because I was pleasantly surprised at what this does to your fabric. This might be hard to tell, but maybe you can hear it on my microphone. It sounds like I have a piece of like cardstock in my hands, and that's kind of what it feels like as well. Like it kind of wants to stand up. Here's a piece that has not been done. Okay, sounds a lot different. You know, I mean, it's just crinkly and soft. So that versus this. It's kind of crazy actually. And this now feels like I'm sewing on a piece of paper. So, okay, that's just a little demo on the Acorn. I've only used it for a little bit, but I am quite pleased with the results, and I'll put a link on where you can get it below. All right, we're gonna start off by making our pockets, and I've taken my fusible fleece and I've just fused it on one side. And then you're just going to fold that pocket in half like that. And then I take it over to my machine and just do some quilting on it. And that's what I've done here. I just did some straight line quilting on there. So I just grabbed a friction erasable pin. You can use any marking tool that will disappear off your fabric. And then I just went ahead and made marks every 3/4 of an inch. And then I took that to my machine and stitched that in place. And honestly, that's just for decoration purposes. It just makes it look a little bit more finished. You could do any design on here that you wanted. And we're gonna make 2 of these pockets, both for the outside panels of our bag. All right, so now I have our 2 outside pockets done. Now we're gonna work on the inside pocket, and since our inside pocket doesn't have something that's gonna be covering those raw edges, we need to do it a little differently. I've still pressed my fusible batting to one side, and then we're going to go ahead and take that and press it in half wrong sides together. We're going to sew right up these sides and in about 1 inch on both sides, and then we're going to leave an opening right here so that we can turn our pocket right side out when we're done. And then here's our inside pocket. I went ahead and flipped it right side out, so I still have my opening right here, and then I've just sewn a top stitch right along the top just for decorative purposes. If you wanted, you could also run some stitching, totally up to you, but I am going to just go ahead and leave this one as is with that opening. I did just give it a really good press, but we're going to go ahead and set all 3 of these pockets aside. The next thing that we're going to work on are our side pockets, and for this project we're going to be using the fusible foam. We're going to take our foam piece and we're just going to center it on that pocket, and you'll see that there's a little bit left on the sides and on the bottom. I did that so that when we're sewing the side pocket, the side panel, and the main bag panel together, there's not so much bulk right here. It's just going to make your life a little bit easier. But I'm going to go ahead and push that right up against our fold and then press that down like that. We're going to take this to our ironing board and we're just going to give it a quick press with my Laura Star. It's going to fuse almost immediately, and then I go ahead and do the same thing I did with my other pockets, which is draw 3/4 inch horizontal lines across the pocket and just sew those lines. And then I also did an outside stitch just all the way around the edge. It just keeps all these edges together. It makes it a little bit easier when we're assembling our bag. All right, so here's our fusible, and you just want to be really careful that you're not getting your iron anywhere on the fusible. Like if it's sticking out a little bit like this, that fusible will really adhere to your iron. I do have a how to clean your iron video here on YouTube in case that does happen, because it has, but normally I try and keep my fusible slightly smaller than my actual fabric so that I don't have that problem. And you're going to want to follow the instructions on your fusible. For this one, you just need to set your iron on it for about, I think they say 10 or 15 seconds just to fuse it. This is double-sided fusible, so I do want to make sure that I don't have this down on my pressing mat and then fusing it this way, because the other side will fuse to your pressing mat. And don't ask me how I know that. It does pull off, so it's not the end of the world, but still not fun. Okay, so we're just going to go ahead and take that. I'm going to take my Laura Star, and if you don't have a really good steam iron like this, you can just press it like that, but it's not quite fused. But watch this. If you use the steam, and then we're going to hit it on the other side really quick. just like that. That was about 3 seconds. This is live. And look at how well that's fused. Isn't that cool? So now we just need to take this to our sewing machine and do a little bit of quilting on it, and then I am going to run a finishing stitch around all the edges just to keep these loose ends together. It's going to make it a little bit easier when we're sewing our bag together. Okay, so here's my second side panel done. So we've got both of those done. They're trimmed to size, and then I just ran a stitch around the outside edge just to keep that loose fabric nice and secure for when we're putting our bag together. So in the same exact way that we made these, we're going to make our side panels for our bags. So I just have an outside fabric, my lining fabric, and then I pressed the fusible foam in between, and then I just used my ruler to draw 1.5 inch diagonal marks going in both directions, stitched on those, pressed it to get rid of my lines, and now I've got my side panel. So I've got one side panel with one side panel pocket, another side panel with my other side panel pocket. And then here are our 3 pockets. These are for our outside, and then we have our inside pocket. And we're gonna go ahead and just set all of these pieces aside. Now we're going to work on the main portion of our bag. And one thing to note is that this bottom panel is 1 inch shorter than it is wider. An easy way to tell that is your top and bottom panels will be the same width. If you try to put it the other way, when you go to sew your top and bottom panels on, you'll see that those panels are longer. So just make sure that you have this bottom panel turned the correct way. And then we're going to take one of our top panels, and we're going to sew these 2 together, but before we do that, we have a couple pieces to add. So the first piece we're going to add is one of our side pockets. We're just going to center it on that panel, and then we're going to take some pins and just pin that in place. We're going to take our strap, and making sure that your strap isn't twisted, so it's going to be looking like this. We're going to pin that strap in place so that it covers the edge of our pocket by about 1/2 to 1/4 of an inch. Just be consistent, so whatever you do on this side, do on the other side, and we're going to just pin that in place. And then we're going to take the bottom of our bag, we're going to place that right side down and just line everything up. And then I'm just going to reuse my clips to clip everything in place. You can add a couple on the side, just to make sure nothing goes anywhere. Then we're going to take this to our machine. We're going to sew right along this edge using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I actually do come back and back stitch where these straps are just to give them a little bit extra. They're going to be sewn on really well by the time we're all done, but I just like to do that. So here's what it's looking like, and we can take that and press it. And then the other thing I sometimes like to do is either pin or just clip these in place just so they don't go all over while we're trying to do the other side. Okay, so we're basically going to now scoot this up. We're going to take our other panel, and if you have directional fabric, just make sure that it's going right side up. We're going to take our other pocket and center that. Again, we're going to place our straps down, and you just want to make sure that that strap is covering your pocket so that when we sew it down, again, it's going to sew down the side of your pocket. I did put an extra clip up here just to keep my strap from getting crooked like it did on my first side. And then we're going to take this panel and place it right side down on top. And again, just clip everything back in place, making sure you've got all those layers. Again, we're going to take this to our machine and sew 1/4 of an inch along our edge. Here's what our panel is looking like. So we've got our bottom, our pockets, our straps, and then our top. We're just going to place that right side down. We're going to take our fusible, place that right side down, or any side down, there's no side, and then take our lining and place that. And I actually have it upside down to how I'll actually do it. I always put the lining down because there's no seams or anything. All right, so we've got everything laid out. We've got our top panel, our fusible, and then our lining panel. We're going to take this to our ironing board and just fuse it per our instructions. Now, if you are using a nylon webbing instead of a cotton webbing, just be careful not to hit this too much with your iron. You can hit it a little bit, but it will melt under your iron. So you can just move these out of the way when you press up here. And I usually pull my pocket back as well, press this section, fold everything back, press the middle, and then repeat on this other side just to get everything nice and fused. All right, here's our panel. It's fused to our fusible. The fusible instructions have you cut it the same size. I just cut mine a little bit oversized, so I had a little bit more room to work with. But we're fused on both sides, and we're ready to now move on to our next step. And this again is optional, but I like to fold this back and just do a little quilting on this portion and on this portion. Next, I'm going to go ahead and just trim off any excess foam or lining sticking out from the wrong side of my bag, just to make sure it's all nice and squared up. And then here is what our trimmed up bag is looking like. I just quilted the top two. You could quilt the bottom if you wanted. Next, we're going to flip the pocket and strap out of the way and flip it to lining side up. We're going to take our inside pocket and center that across the horizontal. And then I'm going to put it about 2 inches down from the top edge, because what's going to happen is that pocket's going to get hidden so you won't see the stitching on the front of your quilt. And I'm just going to pin it in place so it's not moving. We're going to take it to our machine and sew down the side across the bottom, making sure to close up that opening, and then back up the other side. I do backstitch at my stop and start. And here's our pocket, all nice and secured. And then as you can see on the front, there's a little bit of stitching there, but that's going to get covered up as soon as we sew the pocket and straps. Next, I'm going to take a ruler and I'm going to mark 1.5 inches down from the top edge of our bag. I'm going to repeat that on the other strap as well. We're going to sew up the side of the strap just about 1/8 of an inch in, making sure that we catch that pocket as well. We're going to sew across at that 1.5 inch mark and then back down the other side to secure our straps. We're going to repeat this process on the other side of our bag as well. And here is what our finished outside panel looks like. I've got the quilting on top and bottom. My straps are secured. Our pockets are also secure. And then we have our pocket on the inside as well. And as you can see, that pocket now is nice and secure, but you can't see it from the front side of the bag. The next thing I'm going to do is take my accent ribbon, and this is optional because this seam is finished right along here, but I do like to add a little accent ribbon right along this seam just to give it a little bit something extra. I'm going to take it to my sewing machine and sew right along the edge of the ribbon on both the top and bottom edge to secure it in place. This is totally optional, but I think it gives your bag a little something extra. And then I'll come back and just trim off any excess. And here is what our bag is looking like. So we've got our finished bag panel, and then we have our finished side panels and side pockets. And I'm going to go ahead and add some binding to this just to give it a little bit extra. You don't have to do this on the pockets because they do have a finished edge on them, but I think the binding adds a cute touch, and then also it just makes it all match with the rest of the binding on the bag. So we're going to take our straight edge binding, our shorter pieces, we're going to add them to the top of our pockets. All right, so I'm at my sewing machine. Again, I'm just going to line that binding up along the top edge. All right, we're sewing using 1/4 inch seam. We're just going to press that binding up, flip our piece over like this, and then I press my binding down just so it's even with that top edge, and then press it over. And then now we're just going to run a stitch right down that side, about like a 1/8 inch in. So here's what our finished binding looks like. You can decide which one you want to be the front. I like this as the front of my bag. You're just going to want to be consistent, so whatever you do on the pocket, do on the side panels and the top of your bag. So we're going to take those remaining binding pieces and do the exact same thing to our side panels and our other side pocket. Now we're going to add the binding the exact same way to the bottom, both bottom edges of our bag, but this is where we also need to add our little strap to be able to tie our bag closed. And so I've gone ahead and sewn it on the front edge, flipped it around the back, and then I just put all these clips on here to hold it in place. And then you just want to find the middle point of your bag, which for me should be this marker. I just usually fold my bag in half, mark that center, and then I know where to put my ribbon. And then we're just going to take our ribbon and tuck it right up inside that binding, pin it back in place, and then now when we add, and again, keep that handle out of the way, we're going to take this to the machine, sew that edge down, making sure that we are catching our ribbon in there as well, and then we'll repeat this on the other end of the bag. Next, I'm just going to trim off any extra from my binding. I always make my binding strips just a tad longer. So again, bind both pockets, both side panels, and the top edges of our bag. The other thing I did was just run a quick stitch right along the edge of our bag just to keep all those layers together. I'm also going to take my side pockets and my side panels and just sew those together. You can sew them together with just a basting strip, but that's going to keep everything from shifting when we add our side panels to our main bag panel. And here's what our pockets look like. I've just attached them so that they are ready to go. And then here we are, we have all our pieces bound and we're ready to assemble our bag. And I'm gonna go ahead and mark the center of my bag, and just the easiest way to do that is just fold it right sides together and then just put a clip where your centers are. I'm going to go ahead and draw a mark where those center lines are. I'm also going to draw a mark 2.5 inches up or away from that edge. So we've got a mark here, here, and here, 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 and here. Next, we're going to take one of our side panels, and I like to just lay it down just like this so that the lining is touching the lining. And I start clipping right down this edge. And hopefully our end should hit this corner right here, which it is, so we're in good shape there. And then the next thing I'm going to do is clip it to the opposite side. So I just like to start at the tops and clip my way down. All right, now we've got our bottom corners and edges right here. So I'm just going to clip this center one, and then I'm going to ease that corner in. And then we're going to take this with our binding and sew around that edge. You can pre-sew if you want. I'm going to go ahead and just add my binding as I go. So I'm going to take, this is our bias binding. Again, this one has stretch. That's going to help us get around this curve. So we're going to take our binding and we're going to lay it right sides down. And I'm going to overlap the top of my bag just by about 1/4 to 1/2 inch so that I can fold that binding down so we have a finished edge on the top. I'm going to add a clip there just to hold my top edge in place. I usually don't clip my binding in because it's stretchy. It's going to start moving. So I just let the binding do its thing, but just for demonstration purposes, we'll attach it. You're going to sew right along this edge, and then we're going to add the binding the same way we did on our pockets. So we're just going to flip it in half, flip it around to the other side, and then we'll come back and sew it to this inside edge. And we're going to repeat that on both sides of our bag. I like to just do one side at a time, then I'll come back and add this side. This is a lot of layers to get through, so if your machine is having a hard time, I do recommend switching to a denim needle. That should help. And I am going to back stitch right here at the top, and then I'm just going to slowly work my way around. When you get to the corner, you just need to just kind of ease it around that corner. And I'll usually stop and reposition my bag every little bit so that I can get around that corner. Now when I get back to this edge, I'm just going to trim off that binding so that I can fold it over. And as you can see, getting around those corners is a little bit crazy, but just take your time and go slow. And then we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to fold this binding over and then sew around. And this one I will usually prepare. So I'm just going to go ahead and place clips just to keep that in place as I'm going around that edge. And then again, fold in this top edge. All right, so that's what it should be looking like. Now we're just going to go ahead and sew around that inside edge, just like we did when we added the bindings to our pockets. Just be careful, obviously, that you're getting all of your layers in. And if it gets a little wonky, don't worry about it. That's all right. Nobody will ever notice when you're all done with your bag. All right, guys, that is it for our mini weekend tote bag tutorial. I made a couple versions of these bags. This blue one is made using my Bloom fabric, some scraps that I had left over from that, and then this one is made using the fabric from my new Quilty fabric line. And I did stick a little label on the inside of my binding there, which I thought was a cute idea. I forgot to do that in today's video, so this bag doesn't have it, but I could easily go back in and just take out that stitching right there, add a little label, and then I would have that on the bag we made today as well. As you can see, it turned out really cute. We've got our tie closure, front, back, and side pockets. And then of course inside we have a pocket in there for some goodies as well. So this fun bag finishes at about 5 by 13 by 11 or so. It's a great purse size, carry-on bag size. It's also the perfect size for taking any of your craft projects on the go as well. So I'm so glad I finally sat down and had time to do a mini version. It also matches my large version, so if I'm traveling, I can put all my clothes in the large one, and then I have a cute little mini for all of my accessories and smaller items. I would also love to see your projects, so if you make this bag, make sure to post your progress in our Sew With Me group on Facebook. I'll make sure to put a link for that group below. Thanks so much for joining me for for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please make sure to thumbs up and subscribe. You can also hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any upcoming fun. Thanks for joining me today, and I will see you in the next video.